Welcome to the Recover You podcast. I'm Kylene.
And I'm Patrick.
We are a couple in recovery
from sex addiction
and betrayal trauma. Together, we share our story to encourage you on your journey. It's here that we talk about sex addiction, betrayal trauma, mental, emotional, and physical health, faith, and anything and everything needed to recover you to your most authentic self that God created you to be. Hello, and welcome to this episode of Recover You. Patrick?
Good afternoon, good morning, good evening.
And good night.
Good midnight.
What was that? That was like a TV show, wasn't it? Good afternoon, good morning.
No, I think it's good morning, good afternoon, good evening, or something like that. I don't know.
Yeah, but it's like from like a TV show or newscaster. I don't know.
If anybody knows, send us a comment.
Yes. It's deeply ingrained in our subconscious somewhere.
Yeah.
Well, today we're going to talk about 5 practical ways to establish safety after discovering your spouse is a sex or porn addict. So I thought, you've heard the term safety 10 billion times if you've listened to this podcast for any amount of time. And so I kind of wanted to take that idea that we talk about all the time. And over the past 2 years, we talked about it in so many different ways and in so many different contexts, and just boil it down to like really tangible, practical, what does this look like when you are going through discovery, and what are the action steps that help someone create safety? Because I just posted this in the Recover You Facebook. Actually, let me pull it up real quick, because I was talking about the first phase of discovery being shock. And this is what I said. The first phase of discovery is shock. This can be confusing because often we think of shock as being frozen or debilitating. But in reality, the high levels of stress hormones can allow us to get a lot done in this phase. So I often see women accomplishing a lot and feeling fairly okay. That's in quotation marks. Like they know they're not okay, but they kind of feel okay in this phase as they move through all of the necessary steps of research, connecting their partner to a therapist, looking for a coach or therapist for themselves, beginning to learn about what has just happened. While discovery is extremely shocking and traumatic in itself, it can feel confusing that we don't often feel some of the deeper emotions during that period of time. And that's really, really normal because the brain is seeking safety. So what I'm talking about like in this post is basically the shock phase. Everybody's going to experience it. And sometimes we feel like, wow, I'm getting a lot done and like I can focus and I have energy, but that's because of the stress hormones. When we start to create safety, which is very, very, very important, and that's what shock and stress hormones allow us to do. They give us the energy and the focus to be able to kind of take the steps that we need to create safety. Then when safety is created, some of those deeper emotions will begin to actually come up, because basically once our brain goes, okay, we have some stability, I can relax a little bit, I have some capacity, I have some downtime, I have some rest, I have some resiliency here, then it moves into this phase of, okay, now I have to like process what has actually happened. And that's where some of our deeper healing work comes in and our deeper emotions begin to come up, which again can feel really confusing because it's like, okay, my husband's in sobriety now and I'm connected to a therapist and things are settling down and he's not relapsing and everything's actually like really good right now. But now I'm angry, or now I can't stop crying, or now I have a lot of anxiety, or now all my triggers are coming up. So that being said, both are very important phases. They're both natural. They're both part of the normal recovery process. And it actually speaks to the intelligence and the wisdom of your brain, of your nervous system, of your body as it navigates something that's really overwhelming and scary. Because when you have something that's really, really scary, it goes into survival mode. Okay, what do we need to survive? I'm going to connect you to this. I'm going to connect me to this. I'm going to get these things done. And your body's like, cool, that's what I need to focus on. And that's the capacity that I have. But then your nervous system cannot be outrun. So once that those fundamental core things of safety have been created, then we need to, dive into some of the deeper work, and your nervous system will remind you of that by actually allowing you then the space to feel the emotions. So both phases are really, really important. And if you're kind of feeling confused, like maybe, you're in one phase and you don't know what to do, or in the next phase and you're feeling a little overwhelmed, just know that that's like really, really normal. And I want to kind of say that because I think when you both can feel overwhelming in different ways, if that makes sense. So today we're going to talk about what is that actual process then of creating safety? What are some of those steps that people can take action? Mm-hmm. Because, one of the reasons we talk about this and do the podcast is because we really believe that the sooner people can get connected to resources that are helpful and begin taking action on them, the sooner it lays that foundation of stability, which means the sooner we can move into some of the deeper healing.
So I wanna just address the notion of establishing safety. Ideally, both partners are going to be engaged in this pursuit of safety. So the addict is proactively moving through processes that create safety in the relationship, and then also the betrayed has articulated the appropriate steps that are needed for them to feel safe too. So if you take both of those actions together, that really helps that whole process. Yeah. It is a little bit harder when the addict chooses not to engage in that.
No, it's a lot of bit harder.
Yeah, but it doesn't.
This is what I
should
say.
Still empower the betrayed to establish your own rules for safety.
Yes.
And because it's information. How the addict responds to those requests from you, or those boundary requests, or whatever those are, and we're going to talk about some of that stuff, is information, and it really establishes what that person, seems to think, or what they want to do, what
the addict wants, like their willingness to recover,
right?
And we have to take action on the reality, which is based on behavior. Mm-hmm. But yeah, that's what I talk to betrayed partners about this concept all the time, is that, boundaries are information, exactly what you just said. And when you have a couple that is moving towards reconciliation, if you want reconciliation, both people have to be engaged in the safety creating process. Mm-hmm. Because if you are staying in the same house with someone who's not participating in creating safety and is the person who has hurt you and told your brain and nervous system that they are not safe, there are things that you can do to help create some safety within yourself, but it will be limited. And there's no way around that, because your brain and your nervous system can't be hacked if they are still under the same roof as somebody that it perceives as dangerous. So that's why, if reconciliation is on the table and we're going to be under the same roof as someone that our brain perceives as dangerous because they have hurt us, both people have to be part of that process. Otherwise, it won't be as effective. And the reason that's so damaging is because if the betrayed partner cannot get into a place where her nervous system feels safe, then she will not be able to effectively begin to move into deeper levels of healing, because that process has to be so solid in her brain and her nervous system that it believes that it can relax in order to be able to move forward in an effective way. So it's really, really important that both people participate. But I will also say that what I have seen over and over and over and over and over and over and over again is that part of the way this is most effective, if and when it's going to be effective for a couple, is when the betrayed partner really takes this part on and gets very, very, very clear about the expectations around this. Mm-hmm. If a betrayed partner is kind of unsure what this looks like, or they don't have support sort of thinking through these, and they're not communicating boundaries very clearly, and there's no judgment there, it's just sometimes we're not aware, we've never had to do this before. But what I kind of see is when people are not quite as engaged in this part of it, the couple will not move forward as clearly and as safely, as quickly as couples that really lock this down pretty quickly. Mm-hmm. Now, the things that we're going to talk about today are examples. They are not necessarily you have to do X, Y, Z, or you have to do it exactly the way we did it. But these are some pretty common things that we think help a couple create safety pretty quickly. And again, we're sort of talking about, your nervous system having the space and the capacity here to breathe, to relax. Mm-hmm. And so we want to think about this. It's not just emotional. It is also physical. And there's this whole body holistic approach here to safety where, even talking about symptoms, when you're thinking about not feeling safe, you're having insomnia, you're having anxiety, you're having, jumpiness, you're having a lot of triggering thoughts, you're having hypervigilance, you're having, your body, maybe some of your muscles are clenched. I've had clients that have had nightmares, just a lot of different things where your body is just, I can't fully relax now, versus when you feel safe, I can breathe, I can feel happy emotions, I can feel hopeful. And that's not like a promise that, hey, we do these 5 steps and we're going to feel that day one. No, these are like the boundary lines that create the space for you to continue to curate that safety so that you can begin to rest over time as it's consistently created for you. And as you offer those boundaries, the partner then respects them. And then those boundaries being respected helps you build that trust over time. So it's all totally connected between the individual setting them and also the partner respecting them. Really, really, really important. Because that's another piece to it is that I see a lot is like when a partner steps over a boundary, it really sets the betrayed spouse back. And so it's very difficult. And it's so, so, so crucially important for the person who has done the wounding to respect whatever boundaries are set, like without question. It's so important because when they're not, if they want any opportunity for health in the relationship and reconciliation and connection, safe connection with their partner again, respecting the boundaries is like fundamental to that process because without it, you're building on something that's a very bumpy foundation and it's very tenuous and there's hurt going to be, happening throughout the process and stuff like that. So what are some practical, tangible, actionable things that we can do kind of when we're in this shock phase, sort of in the beginning? And by the way, like maybe you're a year into this, but maybe some of these things haven't happened and like healing has been kind of slow. There's not necessarily like a wrong time to do this if you are further down the line. But if somebody's just starting, these are some ideas. And if it maybe some of them will be like, oh, this is something that I could apply now. Maybe I just didn't think about it before. So that's totally fine too. But the first one is separate sleeping areas. Now, I know that, not everyone may be super comfortable with this for whatever reason. It may feel, I think one of the things that comes up, because it comes up around sexuality a lot, is this idea that, well, wait, like if I want to reconcile my marriage, don't we need to be close? Don't we need to be around each other? Don't we need to be like creating this new relationship? If we're far away, like isn't that just going to cause more separation? And that's kind of one of the fears, right? If I put up boundaries, isn't that going to push my partner away? In a healthy process, it will not. It will actually create a healthy foundation so that the two of you can actually have deeper intimacy, deeper connection, deeper closeness that's really, really based in a place in your body and in your mind and your emotions where it's so relaxed that it is like totally different than maybe anything we've experienced before. So I understand like that fear because a lot of this is stuff that like we just haven't thought about before, or maybe we haven't had it modeled for us, or we haven't had this experience, or maybe we've heard stories about people that sleep separately and we're like, oh, that's like a weird relationship, right? And so we probably have negative associations with the concept. And then here we are going, but the whole problem is that my husband has been away from me and he, he's looking at other women and all this kind of stuff. And so like, shouldn't I, be the person for him to be around or whatever and things like that. So there's a couple things that I kind of want to address with that. One, we never ever want to make decisions from a place of, if I don't do this thing, my partner will relapse. So that's a fear-based decision. That's not coming from a place of, I feel aligned with this, I feel safe with this, I feel happy with this is good for us, this is good for me, this is good for the relationship. It's coming from a place of fear. So that's one of the things as we're navigating this part of recovery and all of recovery that we always want to hold our decisions up against. Is this moving us towards health? Or is this a decision that's coming from a place of insecurity and fear? And so we always kind of want to challenge that a little bit. The other thing is that sleeping in separate rooms can be incredibly helpful for your nervous system, actually for both people. And I'll kind of, I want you to kind of talk on that in a minute. But I have talked to a lot of betrayed partners that like they will just have extreme anxiety like when they sleep with their partner. And it's like they want their partner to be in the room, but then they have nightmares or they can't fall asleep or they have insomnia or whatever it is. And so it can be very, very, very important to give your body that space because again, it's the psychological, the emotional, the spiritual, and the physical all sort of combined in this thing we call a body, right? And your body has very strong reactions when it doesn't feel safe. And you have to think about this particular situation. The person you trusted has really hurt you. And now sleep is supposed to be like the most relaxed part of the day where your body totally turns off, and it's able to do that because it feels totally relaxed. And it has all these things that it does for you where it processes, like your brain processes what it has learned throughout the day, what it has experienced through the day, right? And it's like if you think about a wild animal, like animals that sleep in your house are super, super relaxed, right? Animals out in the wild, maybe they have a different pattern because they have to constantly be aware, right? Like their nervous system is going to wake them up, or their brain is going to wake them up if they hear a sound because they have to protect themselves. That's kind of what's happening when we're sleeping in the same bed as somebody who has just hurt us so deeply, and that hasn't been resolved yet, and trust hasn't been rebuilt yet. Your nervous system is 2 feet away from another nervous system that it perceives as harming you. And so it's not going to often allow you to get that deep restorative sleep because it feels like on a biological level, it needs to protect you. So I think giving yourself that space, and maybe this doesn't resonate with you at all. Maybe you're like, man, I go to sleep at night next to my partner and we have, certain boundaries, and he's doing really well in recovery and I fall. That's cool. That's totally fine. Then this is not for you. But there are a lot of women that experience a lot of anxiety. And so not being afraid to set that boundary and say, you need to sleep on the couch, or you need to sleep in the guest bedroom or anything like that. Sleep is really important. We have to use it to recover. We need it to be able to, we just came out of we're in the middle of a high stress situation. So we're going to need that for 10,000 different reasons. So we want to prioritize it.
Yeah. I mean, it's, it's sometimes because of like you were saying, like patterns where you go, oh my gosh, if we stop sleeping together, well then, that's the death knell of our relationship. And it's not really, and you both need separate time to be able to process and to be able to think. And sleep is one of the most restorative things that you can do. When I was in my previous relationship, I was turned into a caregiver for my first wife. And basically, I never got any sleep. There was a period of time where I just grunted through and I would get 15 minutes here and I was a mess. And my family needed me to be more than that, you know what I mean? And so it was it's important. And I remember recognizing early on, and I don't know how early it was when we started sleeping apart. I don't know. I think it was relatively
We started sleeping
quickly.
apart I think day one, but it was a little not what it ended up being, meaning you slept in the room but on the floor for a little while because I was so stressed, but I was kind of wait, this is happening, you can't sleep in the bed, but I don't know what's happening, and I have so much anxiety, I want you in the room with me. So we set some boundaries around that, just with physical different distance, but you're still in the room. And then probably within the first couple weeks or so, I think you set up in the guest room.
Yeah. And so it's easy to, I think from the addict side, it's easy to think of what the betrayed needs, but don't underestimate what you need too from the addict side. You need a space where you can, if you're going to group and you're coming back after working through your 10 worst moments, or you've just done EMDR with your therapist, and I mean, you need that opportunity to process through. And we didn't do this on day one, but there at some point, because you're kind of a night owl and I'm not. I'm an early riser, and so we had to kind of go. I think I was like, hey, I kind of need to go to bed about 10. Now, once again, I wouldn't, that's not week one, if you need to be talking to your spouse and working through things. But I think what I recognize through that process is it's very important for me to get some sleep. I think
that's the thing too, is even maybe how I described it, which is very accurate for some people, may not be resonating with others in terms of well, I don't feel afraid of my partner or whatever. But when we have this much anxiety, because of the situation itself, because our brain is trying to make sense of our reality in that phase, just even thinking about it as like, this is a very simple thing in our lives that we can set up to make sure that we're helping our nervous systems recover from the stress of this situation. Because sleep is just so crucial. Think about, even if things were going well in life, when you get really horrible sleep, you're a little more activated the next day. Your nervous system is a little more sensitive. Your brain is a little more fatigued. Your mood is a little bit more sensitive, like all of these things, right? So sleep is so important for our mental health and our physical health, both of which take a tremendous hit after discovery. So that's just something that I think is, I think there's a lot of fear around it. I think there's a lot of like, well, this feels weird, or I'm not really sure about this. I just think try it. Try it for a couple days. Try it for a couple weeks. See how you guys feel. It does not mean that you don't need to communicate through this process. It does not mean that you're not spending time, discussing recovery or engaging in other things or like connecting in other areas or whatever. But just if you are someone that is very activated right now, you feel your nervous system sort of buzzing, you have a lot of anxiety, you're feeling a lot of hypervigilance, you're really stressed, this might provide your body an opportunity to get a little bit more deeper rest, some more deeper recovery. And that's only going to set you up to be able to move into the next phase from a more calm, rested, grounded place. And that's the place that we make clear, good decisions from. And that's for both people, because to your point, the addict is super stressed after discovery too. So it's just, I think, helpful. Like, we need our rest. Like, humans need sleep. Like, nobody does well on bad sleep. And so this is, for me, at least remembering our experience, it was just like, I was so activated for so long in the beginning.
Yeah. And there were moments, and just like a little bit of a recommendation, so one of the things we did is we were on different floors, right? So, I would make it a point to send you a text and say goodnight. And you know what I mean? Like, when I woke up in the morning, because you couldn't, normally I sleep next to you, you knew when I was getting up. So when I woke up in the morning, and we did this for a while, I would come up and just gently tap you and say, hey, I'm up. Everything's okay. Yeah. And so there was, there's little things that you can do in there. And at some point that was disruptive to you, right? It was disrupting your morning sleep. So we stopped the, hey, I'm up, sort of thing. So, but it's just, you can.
I do prioritize my sleep pretty hard.
But you can do that. You can do different things. And once again, it doesn't mean that there's a disconnecting connection. It just means that, hey, this is a step we're both taking just to make sure that we can establish almost a quiet, comfortable, safe space to get some rest.
Right. Which is good. It's going to help the outcome. It's going to help the healing. It's going to help the 5 to 10 year plan. It's going to help the 6 month to the 1 year plan, right? Like all of these things, like helping your body and your brain get into a place that it can feel calm and relaxed is always going to help us move into the healthy place where we can make good decisions and communicate more clearly to each other, more calmly to each other, all of those things. Like sleep is amazing. Sleep to me is like journaling to Patrick. There's the pineapple for this episode.
Well, I will say sleep to me, is like sleep to me. Journaling comes in second. I like my sleep.
Okay. So we both prioritize sleep pretty hardcore. Okay. All right. So that's the first thing. So that's one practical way to establish safety, is just to give yourself a little bit of rest, a little bit of distance, give yourself that literal safe space where you know that you can totally relax and get some deep sleep. So the second practical way is to really think through communication boundaries and expectations. So this is going to be different for every partner. So for example, there are a lot of patterns within these relationships. Every relationship has established patterns of how we communicate, how we do or do not resolve issues effectively or ineffectively, right? So everybody has a pattern of, okay, I get anxious, this is what I do. I get angry, this is how I handle it. We have a conflict, we either shut down or we dig in, or, everybody's pattern is a little bit different. So think through, what are the patterns that might be problematic, uncomfortable, or again, unhealthy, right? We're always thinking, what does healthy communication look like? And what is fear-based or unhealthy, or like an activated state sort of bringing out that we don't want to do anymore, or we don't want to receive anymore from our partner. And so think through maybe some of those patterns. I'm just going to give some examples of some boundaries that may be appropriate, or some expectations within communication that we can think about. But communication is a really, really big one. And this is something I think about a lot. I was like, man, I feel like if there were cameras in our home, and like we had like a little recovery reality show, there's a part of me that thinks that people would be like shocked at how much we talk to each other all the time about everything. Like we just talk all the time, like constantly. So when we say communication, I really deeply believe you cannot over communicate through a process like this, but you absolutely can under communicate, which can be problematic, or we can communicate in ineffective ways. So we want to make sure that we're communicating often and we're communicating well, and that we're receiving communication from our partner from a healthy place. So just kind of broad brushstroke there, but thinking a little bit more specifically, a boundary that might come up in this is you don't have to participate in conversations where the partner refuses to take responsibility or they really change the narrative. So have we talked about Darvo on the podcast before? Okay. So I'll bring it up again because I actually think this happens fairly often. I mean, sometimes people might go, oh, this sounds exactly like this pattern that we've been living in forever, or maybe it just comes out from the stress of discovery, and then it shifts around a little bit as they develop health. But it is a pattern that is important to be aware of, and that is deny, attack, reverse, victim, offender. And that's basically where, Patrick, that if I was to bring up something that I was upset with to you, you would then deny your responsibility in it, attack me in some way, maybe make it personal, and then you would make yourself the victim. And so, this can be seen in a lot of different scenarios where a betrayed partner is going, hey, like, I'm really upset that this happened, or that you said this to me, or that, you weren't helpful in this particular situation. And then the offending partner gets defensive and goes, well, that's ridiculous. You're overthinking this, or, they're minimizing the experience itself. And then they shift it and go, but you should feel sorry for me because I have, I'm dealing with all of this. I'm overwhelmed at work and I'm trying to go to recovery and I'm trying to do this. And how can you be mad at me for this? And, and so they try to make themselves the victim and the person that's hurting the offender. And so it's a really negative shift. So for a betrayed partner, when that's happening, remembering, like, when things get confusing in a conversation, or when you bring something up and it's immediately shifted to where now you're the problem, and you begin to sort of identify that pattern, one of the things you can do, number one, is becoming aware of that. So now it's like in the conscious, right? Because a lot of times what happens is we sort of get sucked into these and we get confused and we get turned around a little bit. So becoming aware of the pattern is number one. And then number two is, once we become aware of it and then we notice that the pattern starts, we can have a boundary around that says, you know what? This isn't going to be a productive conversation. So it's not a conversation I'm willing to continue at this point. And in a separate conversation, maybe when things are more calm, you can explain it more deeply and say, hey, when I bring something to you, I need you to be able to sit and listen and empathize. And if that's not possible, those aren't conversations that I can continue to have. If you're going to blame me, if you're going to gaslight me, if you're going to turn yourself into the victim, and you can get really clear on what those expectations and what those boundaries are. If this happens, then I cannot continue in that conversation. If it happens long term, that's going to be detrimental to our recovery process, something like that.
So, from a always speaking from the addict side, it is it's not always easy, right? You're in these things, and maybe you've had a run of some really good days, and you're connecting well, and all of a sudden you wake up the next morning, you're expecting that to continue, and then your spouse's mood is sad and off, and then there's questions, and it maybe takes you by surprise. And I think you and I had gone through this. What would sometimes get me would be the juxtaposition. So let's say something great happened at work. You were a couple of years into recovery. I come home, and then you kind of hit me with a question. It would be weird because I would be riding a high, and the high had been there. So it is okay to remember that you're not always going to get this 100% right.
Yeah, I think I'm talking more about when this is like a residual pattern that is like super problematic and like ongoing. Not necessarily like, we had a bad day. Yeah.
No, but I think the thing I want to put out there as an important thing. So if your spouse who's hurt says, hey, I don't need, you're not taking responsibility and you're finding yourself getting activated on that, one of the best things you can do is you can call a timeout and say, hey, can you give me about 20 minutes? I'll come back and we'll talk about it. So that way you don't get in this escalatory thing where you're going back and forth. It gives you that moment to step away, maybe call your accountability partner, say, hey, help calm me down. I need to have this conversation, right? Because human beings are human beings. And to your point, maybe you haven't ever witnessed a healthy interaction, right? Yeah. And so you just don't,
well, and I think that's, it's important on both sides that that one person is able to go, this isn't healthy and we have to change the pattern. Yeah. So I can't participate in this. And then to your point, we aren't going to be perfect through this, but the expectation is that over time, that individual does have the emotional capacity to deal with a conversation like that without having to call someone to calm down. Like we should be able to have these conversations respectfully.
The ultimate goal is to get to that point. Yeah. But I think like you're as you work through it, like I always felt to myself, like when that would happen, I would think to myself, okay, the next words out of your mouth should be some degree of accepting responsibility and validating your feelings. Like it would go through my head. I'd be like, accept responsibility, validate your feelings. And I know I didn't always get it right because once again, it was 10 o'clock at night. I needed you know what I mean? But that was always kind of my default, but I didn't always get it right. And so I think had I never gotten it right, which is what you're talking about, it's absolutely okay on the betrayed side to say, I'm going to call the timeout and we're not going to have this discussion right now because I need you to accept responsibility, validate where I'm coming from and not make it about you. I want to say this, and this has come up and it's come up and it's come up. There's nothing that the betrayed spouse has done to cause your addiction. There's nothing that the betrayed spouse has ever done to cause your addiction. Are there hard moments in any relationship? Of course. But it was your choice to medicate those hard moments with inappropriate behavior. Right. That person never did anything to cause you to act in those ways. So accept responsibility for that. Yeah. So. Yeah, absolutely. So I think someone has to be able to say, hey, like this isn't a healthy pattern if it is a pattern. And that's kind of where we want to go. If we're talking about setting boundaries, which is, to the point of establishing safety, we have to think through the boundaries that we need in for our nervous system to be able to calm down. If we already know, because a lot of these patterns are most of the time, they're clearly established before we find something out. That's right. So if you're at the point of discovery and this is the type of conflict lack of resolution that you're used to, you kind of like know that to some extent that, this is not going to be me sharing my emotions or me sharing my anger at your betrayal or you talking about these things may not go well. So if that's you and you know that, then these are going to be appropriate boundaries to say, hey, like I need space to process my emotions. If I share them with you, this is kind of what I need. And to your point, it may not go perfectly every time, but we've also talked about there has to be a trajectory towards what is healthy. And we need to be able to see that because if we don't see the trajectory, we're going to keep engaging in the exact same patterns. Another communication boundary to think about would be, as I learned about the behaviors and sort of the whole context of the addiction, there were certain things within communication, even words that were upsetting to me or hit a different way for various reasons. And we don't have to go into any of that today. But because of the nature of everybody's story listening to this podcast is a little different. Sometimes there were text messages that were exchanged. Sometimes there were human beings that were spoken to. Sometimes there was, whatever it was, words are involved. Communication is involved in some way, sometimes through these experiences. So when that's the case, sometimes there's words that might be triggering to your betrayed partner. And so for me, I just let you know what those were over time, and I may not know day one, but again, this was like a constant communication, an open conversation. It was an open dialogue through the process where as I became aware over time that certain things were more upsetting to me, we just learned and we continued to communicate. And then that was kind of off the table. I don't want you to use this word to describe me, or I don't really like, XYZ or whatever. And so
it's not just about like conflict resolution is important to sort of figure out how can we communicate in a safe way to each other, but it's also like the recovery aspect to it. If there are things about the situation itself that sting a little bit more than maybe something else, having the respect for your partner to take that off the table, even if to you, the person who did the betraying, maybe to you it doesn't mean anything. Maybe it you're like, don't even remember saying that or doing that or whatever. It doesn't matter. If there are different things that hit the betrayed partner harder for whatever reason, their own past, their own feelings about it. But as we go through recovery, a boundary that's going to help create safety is going to be you respecting that. So being able to receive that and then work through the communication that way.
Well, in recovery for both, but especially recovery for the addict, what you're doing going through the recovery process is you're growing your emotional intelligence. And so through the growth of emotional intelligence, you start to recognize why words might be harmful. You start to put yourself in the feet or the shoes of your partner and go, okay, I get that. I'm not going to use that word. I'm not going to double down and be like, oh, come on, it's just a word, know.
Right.
And so you're going to really understand why that is a problem, and you're going to take active steps if you're interested in relationship repair in going through that. I do remember, and once again, this was a long time into it, you would have, and I learned this via my growth in emotional intelligence. I learned there were just sometimes when you just got activated and you would be asking questions and I would be answering it. And I think at one point, and it wasn't day one, and it probably wasn't even, maybe 8 or 9 months, where I would say, why do you need to ask that question? Because we had already gone through a disclosure. We had already done all of these different things. And I remember a couple of times when I asked you that question, you just broke down crying because you were activated, right? You were, and I didn't say, why do you want to ask that question? It was like as we had talked through this conversation, I think I kindly held you and was like, why do you need to ask that question? I think because of my approach, you softened at that point and you recognized the reason you were rapid firing questions is because of the pain. It was very painful. And you did recognize that there was nothing that you really wanted to know. It was just about asking questions. And you would break down. And then I had that opportunity to care for you at that moment. But I wouldn't have had that ability early on, you know what I mean? I wouldn't have had, because at that point you needed to know what was going on.
Right.
Those questions were very important for a couple of reasons. Number one, you needed to know, you had a right to know. And number two, I had to learn how to speak to that. I had to learn how to go, I was a cyber sex addict. And what did that involve? And so as painful as that was to describe that's hard, but it's a huge part of your healing process as the addicted person to be able to tell your story and speak about it. And you know what I mean? So anyway, that's just an example as you grow your emotional intelligence in these conversations that you can really start to understand what's going on. And so that's why when you respect somebody's communication boundaries and you say, hey, I'm not going to use that word because you asked me not to. I'm not going to, if we decide to be intimate, I'm not going to say these things because these may be triggering. I'm not just going to roll them out there again. You know what I mean? And so I'm going to care for your heart and your emotions and your brain patterns with as much tender mercy as I can because I've hurt you. And now it's time for me to show up in a way that is aware.
Yeah.
Because we don't show up aware.
And to that point, the first the first phase of that for the addict is to dig really intentionally into their own recovery so that they can manage their own emotional responses so that they can get into that phase as quickly as possible where you can now sit with the traumatized partner's emotions. What really seems to be difficult is when the addict struggles with his own emotional regulation for a long time. And then the betrayed partner is traumatized by their behavior and they're also not feeling like they can be supported through their healing process from their partner. And so then they're alone and they're still trying to reconcile and they feel hurt by it's just a negative spiral. So the more we can find the tools and the emotional regulation to be able to sit and have these conversations that are respectful, that are empathetic, that are supportive, where you're thinking about the pain, the outcome of what has happened. It's literal space. It gives people space to say, I'm allowed to have the full spectrum of normal human emotions to someone really hurting me. And I know that my partner can sit and hear that. Not that I'm like verbally abusing you, but, I was able to cry. I was able to yell. I was able to have panic attack. I mean, I was able to do everything in front of you, and you were able to receive it and then sit there and go, I know that this is an outcome of something really bad that I did, and I hate that. How can I help you in this moment?
I was even thinking something. You even had the freedom to come down when I was sleeping downstairs and say, hey, can you come up here and be with me? And also know that I'm not going to take it as like all right, I've moved back in.
Oh, yeah.
You know what I mean? So like you knew that I would still stick to that boundary, but you would open the door every now and then because you needed something or you needed connection. And I was going to be, it didn't hit me at the time, but one of the greatest gifts that you can give to your betrayed partner as you're moving through this is start to become that source of safety and strength for them.
Right.
I mean, that is a really great thing that you can do, and be genuine in it. Don't be like, hey, here's my phone, as you have bought a burner phone. That's not authentic safety.
Yeah, to that point, I feel like, just be honest.
That's right.
Like, do you want, like, you're either in this or you're not in it, but tell the truth about it, man. Like, that's what we really want. Like, don't jerk us around with that. Yeah. Okay, so the first two practical ways of establishing safety are considering separate sleeping areas is so healing. Communication boundaries. Think through, are there any negative patterns that are like really activating for us, that are really negative, that are really consistent? Let's talk about those. Or there's some triggers we need to talk about. Let's make sure that we're aware of that. The third one is when you're establishing safety, it's that first phase of like, I'm researching, I'm educating, I'm getting my partner connected to support, and I'm connecting to support. Now, again, like ideally, this is all happening like within the first month or two. But sometimes because the conversation, in terms of a global scale is not, out there as much as it should be, sometimes, we'll meet people that have just tried with the information and the resources that they have, and they haven't found the practitioners that specialize in this. They've never been told, hey, your husband might be a porn or sex addict and they should go see a CSAT. And hey, there's something called betrayal trauma and you should connect with someone that's really educated in betrayal trauma and sex addiction. And then, there's something called a full therapeutic disclosure and, all of these things that we talk about. And so they've gone through years of marriage counseling or individual therapy or, all this kind of stuff without some of those foundational support systems. And so again, while this is ideal, if you have just found out, in the past month or so, don't be afraid to go back. And we see this, like go back and fill in the gaps if it's necessary, because sometimes that will happen where, I'm talking to partners and they'll say, hey, we've done all this work and all this kind of stuff. And then we continue the conversation. We're like, okay, what's missing right now, right? Like what's going on that you guys are struggling with? And, typically it's, trust is like that big thing that just cannot come back, and they're still getting triggered and they're still getting activated. And then you sort of find out, well, we had this long trickle disclosure. I'm pretty sure I know everything, right? So then it's like, okay, we're 3 years in now. We've tried all these other things. It might be beneficial to go back. It feels like you're going back to square one, but if you guys have done work, it doesn't have to, we don't have to say it that way, but let's maybe go back in and just fill in the gaps. Like if you're thinking about a foundation, maybe some of the tiles are laid, but there's no grout, right? And it's still kind of, you can slip on that, you can fall on that, like something could break, so let's go back. Like if you need the information, let's get the information. Let's do it in the supervised, detailed, careful way. If you need the polygraph because some things have happened and trust is just like a big thing, let's learn how to do that in a careful, supervised, safe way. Like if you've never had the ability to express your emotions, let's do the impact letter. Let's, there's these steps that are here for a reason. I've really seen over time how much they really do help people. And so it's not that these other systems can't be beneficial, can't be helpful, that individuals haven't done the work. But I do find that sometimes when they're struggling, going back and doing these things can still be helpful. So that's one of the things that can really provide safety is like, let's go back. Let's make sure we're connected to people who are very, very versed in sex addiction, in betrayal, in trauma, so that we get feedback in our sessions with those people. Hey, what you're feeling is normal. Or, hey, like, if you haven't done this, this is going to be helpful for you to move on. Like, if this is a gap where you're just feeling, not like you haven't had any support here, let's do X, Y, Z. So that can be really helpful connecting to the right providers.
I think to add on to that is understanding that it's a 3 to 5 year process. So if the addict goes through 3 rounds of Conquer at 30 weeks, you're going to get a lot of healing out of that, but you're not done. And so, you have to commit to that. And so that's a really important boundary to put on yourself and for the betrayed spouse to understand that it's going to take time. And so you run the risk when you disengage from the healing process too early of falling back into negative patterns. It is an onion, and it needs to be peeled and peeled and peeled and peeled. And so, like I had a thought this week, right? In 4 years, 4 months, I had a thought that's part of this healing process. Not a negative thought, but like something about some of my emotional patterns. I was thinking it through again. You know what I mean? And so it's important for me to kind of have those, be connected to resources that can help you through this long-term process. Maybe at the end of that 3 to 5 year process, it turns into you leading groups or being a co-leader in a group or being a sponsor for somebody or something like that. But it takes time. So if I always encourage you, it's always, and you and I have talked a little bit about this, it's, there's always a notion of like, okay, can we be done? Can we be done? And if you do that way too early, you run the risk of derailing your healing.
Yeah, I think that's so true. And I do think that applies to both people because I think as the wounded partner, it's so traumatic, it's so overwhelming, it's so all-consuming in the beginning that I think there's a lot of times where like, man, if I never had to think about this again, that would be great.
Yeah.
It'd be so awesome. But at the same time, just having, again, that's why I think connecting to the right practitioners is important, because if you're not connected to somebody that knows that timeline, and then they might also gaslight you and be like, well, why aren't you moving? I don't think a good practitioner would ever say this, but like, why aren't you moving forward faster? But if they don't know that timeline and they don't know how to help you navigate that, that's still going to make it go slower, right? So many times in sessions, people will come in doubting their emotions, doubting how they're feeling, doubting like XYZ. And then I'm able to go, it's normal, it's healthy. And actually in this phase, you're like right on track. Like it's so no, but it requires sort of knowing that process to be able to kind of validate that experience, Yeah. So, and that's, again, providing safety for the betrayed partner going, he's connected to a CSAT. It's very specific to what we're going through. They're going to know a process. They're going to be able to help us. He's connected to a group. It's very specific. So that's going to feel very safety providing for the betrayed partner that, hey, my addict husband is now connected to things that are going to be good resources. And then for the betrayed partner to connect to someone that really sees their pain and is able to help them navigate and go, this is normal, or let's work on this, or, let me help you move through this next phase is going to be really, just the education around your nervous system and your brain and like trauma and that this is normal is like calming, right? The fourth thing that's going to help establish safety is super basic and super obvious, and that is the addict shutting down all the sources of acting out. So, whether it's a blocker on the phone, whether it's getting rid of a laptop, whether it is getting rid of gaming devices, setting parental controls on any technology in the house, whatever it is based on their acting out patterns, the very, very obvious first step of like shutting down the access to the behavior itself.
Yeah, I think I've seen this happen with guys where the devices of known betrayal or acting out are discussed between the partners, right? And then they lock them down. Then there's the devices that they didn't really think about that would happen I don't know, Amazon accounts or whatever that may be. And so be proactive, be like, whoa, I was actually on here. Let me go to my partner and say, hey, we need to lock this down. Or, why don't you make it a point to look at the history or, whatever that is, you know what I mean? That's always a really, really important thing to do is be proactive in that. Don't leave any sort of openings that are in there.
Yeah. I mean, like be honest with your partner, but be honest with yourself too. I think that's going to be really important. And then the fifth thing is creating a plan. Mm-hmm. I mean, plan is really what helps people feel safe. When we have a little bit of an understanding of like what's happening, this is trauma, this is how my body responds, this is how my brain is responding. Okay, so that's going to help me calm down because I know I'm not crazy. This is a normal response to something really scary happening, really, really destabilizing happening in my life. My reality has been, it feels like it's been stolen from me. I was going into life living, thinking everything is fine, and then all of a sudden it's not. And so like I didn't choose that, right? So someone processing that and then being able to speak with someone that's like, no, this is your brain doing things, like I was talking at the beginning, like this is what your brain is doing that's really intelligent. It's helping you. Like this is a normal body response. And as we do these things that create safety, it's going to help your nervous system calm down. And so working with someone that can help you create this plan, right? And that is going to reflect some of the things that we've already talked about. What is your safety plan? Do you need to sleep in separate bedrooms? Do you need sometimes physical separation outside of the house? What are the boundaries that you need to establish? What does that encompass? What does that look like? How can we begin to help your nervous system and help you engage in recovery activities? What's his plan for seeing his therapist? What's your plan for seeing your therapist? When do you guys want to do the full therapeutic disclosure? Really kind of coming up with like not a timeline necessarily, but like, this is kind of where we're heading. And then as we move into the next phase of healing, we keep going in terms of, okay, what's the next step in the vision? But from the beginning, working really hard to have that long-term perspective of, again, what is healthy, and we're going to move towards that goal, because if we can hold that there and work with practitioners that really understand the process and we're committed to that process individually and as a couple, then it will become more clear, as we accomplish one step, what the next is going to be.
I don't know if this is 5 asterisk or a footnote in this episode or not, but one of the most, if you think about what you've done to your partner when you betray them, they're going through all of this. So you're talking about establishing safety. One of the kindest things you can do is serve them, and what I mean by that is if there's little kids in the house, make sure you're helping out on that. Her or his ability to manage that those day-to-day things is going to be vastly disrupted. If you need to take over some of the cooking duties, or order a meal service, or take care of the laundry, or wash the car, or whatever that is, it sounds really stupid, but your ability to show up in a meaningful way, because you may not know how to show up in a meaningful way in a communication piece yet, because you're learning that, but you can cook dinner. You can make a pot of coffee. You can give a child a bath. You can do all of those things, that helps your partner navigate through the day-to-day. This is incredibly hard. It's hard on you, and I get that, but you got to remember that what you've done to them is you've pulled the rug out from under them, and you've scrambled their nervous systems. And so sometimes the easiest thing, and it's funny, and we had to talk through this because sometimes they were like, things are hard. I'm going to go do chores. But there is,
yeah, you did.
Yeah, but there is something to being able to do that, right? There's
that was both your way of helping and your coping mechanism a little bit.
No, it was, and I'll admit that, and that was kind of it was a little bit of my life's work on that. You know what I mean, as far as running away and doing chores, but it is something that you can do, because it's it's hard for somebody who's never had an open and honest, empathetic conversation to learn how to do that. But it is pretty easy to fold laundry. You know what I mean? It really is an easy thing to do.
To show up and be present.
That's right. Yeah. That's right. And so sometimes that's all you got. You know what I mean? Sometimes maybe you take the car to get washed. And so don't I've heard this where people will be like, gosh, they don't show up and they're not really helping and I need their help. And you know what I mean? And so like these are good opportunities. One of the greatest gifts you can give after you've betrayed somebody is to start to serve them in the way that they need. And I can't emphasize that enough, because that's where it starts to show that, what you're trying to demonstrate to your partner is, I'm very sorry and I'm going to change. And I'm going to try to do everything I can to support you in this process to become a more well-rounded, safe person again. And I don't really know sometimes day to day how I'm going to do that, but I can do these small little things. Mm-hmm. And so I that's a piece of advice that I give to everybody that I talk to is do the little things. Don't be afraid to do the little things. Enough little things lead to the big things.
Yeah, very good.
Thank you. Yeah.
And you could be like Patrick and you could bring them their morning water every morning.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I don't really drink coffee, right? Very, very much. And so there's this little electrolyte drink that he'll bring me every morning. It's so sweet. Yeah. And I can count on it. And I wake up and I'm like, oh, there's my little drink. And Patrick made that for me. Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right. So listen, we know that some of the things that we've talked about, we kind of like move through them very quickly and we talk about them, matter of factly. But we also want to just reflecting on the whole episode. These are not easy things to do. These are not always easy boundaries to set. They're not easy conversations to have. You're probably, if you're thinking through these things, in a very activated, stressful state. And so we always are going to recommend that one of the first pieces that we mentioned in here that gets done is connecting to somebody that can help you through it.
Absolutely.
Getting connected to a group that can validate the experience because they're 6 months ahead of you. Getting connected to a therapist or coach or practitioner who can help you navigate the next steps and can give you the feedback on your thoughts and feelings and emotions through this process and let you know how normal it really, really is. And they can help you think through the communication, the boundaries, and those sorts of things.
I had one last thing to add, and it's a little bit backwards in the thing, but it's 5 ***. So I just want to make sure that I say this. If you do the laundry and she's appreciative, and then later that night she starts to ask you questions about your sex addiction, one of the worst things you could do is go, but I did the laundry.
Oh my gosh.
Okay, so for some reason that hit me as a panic, and I wanted to make sure I said that.
Panic mode activated.
Yeah, you have.
No, but what you're saying is, listen, do not do the right thing. Period. Mm-hmm. Don't do the right thing expecting adulation or praise.
Right.
For doing the right thing, or for being helpful, or for being sober, or for not hurting someone.
Right.
Like, you're getting back into what is like baseline expectation for a relationship.
Right.
And you're making up for not doing that, for actually causing harm. Mm-hmm. So you have to come at it from that perspective.
Right.
Just because you've done something really wonderful and really awesome and really kind doesn't automatically make up for the harm caused.
Yeah.
That has to be consistent over time.
Right.
So, yeah, agree. Nice asterisk. All right, so to summarize, this is a little bit of a longer episode. To summarize, here are just 5 practical thoughts of establishing safety. And again, work with your practitioner to personalize them, to make them right for you and your relationship, and to help you think through these on your own and with them. Number 1 is considering sleeping in separate areas and getting the rest and recovery that you need. Number 2 is thinking through communication boundaries and expectations within communication. What does that look like for you guys? Number 3 is both of you connecting to educated, specialized support in this area. And number 4 is making sure that the sources of acting out are shut down, making sure that all of that is sort of all the walls are kind of set up around the behavior itself to kind of create the space for sobriety. And then the 5th one, creating a plan. Like what does healthy look like? What is that next step? And what is the ultimate goal, where you guys are going and where you want to be headed? What does a healthy relationship look like? What does recovery look like for the addict and for you?
All right, every day is a new opportunity to choose health and freedom. Make that choice today, and we'll see you next week.
Woohoo! If you're listening to this, it means you've made it through an entire episode. Part of recovery is spending time engaging in healing and self-growth activities. We are thankful that you chose our podcast to be one of those activities today. Make sure you reward yourself for that accomplishment. If you've enjoyed this episode or this podcast, we would love to hear from you. Please take just a few moments to leave a rating and review, letting us know your experience with Recover You. We not only love hearing how these episodes are helpful, but ratings and reviews help others just like you who are searching for recovery information and support find the podcast too. We can't wait to hear from you. See you next week.